If you're looking to add a pop of fall color to your landscape while supporting pollinators, I want you to meet the Forsythia Sage, which is a bold and adaptable plant that does seem to do quite well in Texas conditions. It's not native to Texas, but comes from the high mountains of Mexico. And it's got everything you want, really, in a standout, interesting, pollinator-friendly garden plant. And so we'll explore why this perennial deserves a spot in your Texas native landscape. Hey y'all, Corey here. Welcome to another Texas Nature Journal entry, where I typically focus on plants native to Texas, but today's plant is an exception, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. I think it's for good reason. So Forsythia Sage can thrive in the Texas climate. It can support pollinators, and I think it adds incredible fall interest and color. And in this video, we'll talk about where it comes from, how to grow it, and how to make it shine in your Texas native landscape. So Forsythia Sage is a perennial from the mint family. It grows up to 5 to 8 feet wide with these flower spikes that can reach 3 feet tall. I think that these are brilliant yellow blooms. They appear in fall, making it a standout when many other plants might be starting to fade. Some of the common names for Forsythia Sage include big yellow sage or churro sage. I think it's not just a beautiful plant, but it's also incredibly functional. Let's talk a little bit more about its native range and why it can work well here in Texas. The Forsythia Sage is native to the Sierra Madre Oriental mountain range in Mexico, where it grows at elevations of 4,000 to 5,000 feet, typically in warm, wet areas. So quite unique. But despite its origins, this plant has adapted really well to broad swath of Texas landscapes, especially here in Central and South Texas, despite here in San Antonio only being about 650 feet above sea level. Here's the thing, while I encourage planting Texas natives wherever possible, I also believe a plant's worth is in its performance and adaptability. So the Forsythia Sage does really well in our environment. It hasn't been much maintenance, if at all, for me, and I don't think it poses a risk to the local ecosystem. If someone has other information, they can let me know. But for me, as my greater goal is to pursue the greatest diversity of highly adaptable, high-performing plants in my landscape, this is a win in my book. So this plant is really a pollinator magnet. Its nectar-rich flowers attract hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies, making it a very important resource during the fall migration season. Plus, its tall, bold spikes here add a dramatic flair, I think, and some potential background structure to your pollinator gardens. So if you're looking for a plant that can support some wildlife while adding, I think, serious visual interest, it's clearly an interesting looking plant and backbone, really, to potential garden structure. Here I have some native Texas lantana that hopefully will grow in a little bit more full in this next year beneath it. I think Forsythia Sage is really an excellent choice. So let's talk about how to potentially care for it. So Forsythia Sage thrives in morning sun or partial shade generally. So if your garden gets really intense afternoon sun, which honestly this area does for me a bit, you might need to give it some extra water during the hottest months. However, there's some nuance here. Although it does like wetter conditions typically, it prefers well-drained soil, but it really isn't that picky. So it can handle a variety of different soil conditions, acidic or slightly alkaline conditions without much issue. In the winter, Forsythia Sage will die back down to the ground. You can cut it to the base in late winter or early spring to encourage some fresh growth. And if it starts to spread too much in the shaded areas of your landscape, you can manage it by removing some of the underground shoots. But also, this for me is why I want to find a good balance for it in the right conditions. Maybe a little bit more sun than it might prefer might restrain it too much from proliferating in a way to where it disrupts some equilibrium here. So that's a little bit of my thought process behind why I chose this spot. Granted, we're here in fall shade, a lot of fall shade, but some strong morning sun. So fall conditions here are perfect. Summer conditions are a little testy for it. So we'll see how this goes over time. But I do think the Forsythia Sage works beautifully with other Texas Texas native pollinator plants. You can pair it with some autumn sage or Turk's cap to add some interesting contrast, or you can add white mistflower, I think is another soft kind of ethereal effect that would provide some interesting complement to this Forsythia sage. But for a bold fall display, you can combine it with Mexican bush sages, lavender blooms. I think that together those would be a real showstopper. All right, y'all, that's what I have for you for Forsythia sage, a non-native that I think has earned its place here in some Texas landscapes. So if you're looking for another plant that supports pollinators, thrives in Texas, but is a Texas native plant, you can check out my Texas Nature Journal entry on white mistflower, which I mentioned just a moment ago. It's definitely a great companion here for the Forsythia sage. And don't forget to sign up for my upcoming newsletter, Grow Ensemble, for more tips on creating beautiful, resilient gardens with Texas native and adapted plants. You can find the link in the description below or visit ensembletexas.com/grow. All right, y'all.